Hello everyone, it's Susanna with Hypnosis Haven, and today I'm going to discuss a subject that I touched upon briefly in another video about the theory of ENP, the emo and physical suggestibility types. There's the suggestibility types, which we define with ENP, and there's the sexuality type that we also define with ENP, emotional and physical. So this has to do with sexuality in these terms in regards to hypnosis and the Kappasinean theory. So here, when I'm talking about sexuality, I'm talking about the way an individual orders, organizes, and expresses information that they receive, and that information is received from their environment and the world around them. The way they express it is going to be either in an emotional way or in a physical way. They are two ways of being, and it has nothing to do with anything about orientation or sexuality as it's being used these days. That is not what this is about. This is about Kappasinean hypnosis and the theory of EMP when it comes to sexuality and our way of being. So now that I've made that clear, let's move on. Suggestibility, which I explained in the other video, is the way that we receive information, the way that we learn. So when someone is an emotional suggestible, that person receives information in an indirect way. When they speak directly. When someone is a physical suggestible, they receive information directly. They like to be told straight to the point. That's the way to get through to them. And they speak in an indirect way. They give you all the details about their weekend. They want to know everything and they will tell you everything. That's a fits, okay? The way that they speak is the way that they come out into the world. So even though the way that they take in information is one way, the way that they speak is another way. It's really fascinating. So when we are talking about these two types, know that the suggestibility type is something that we develop from the age of 0 to 8. That is given to us by our experiences from our primary caregiver, generally the mother. So if I say mother, I mean primary caregiver. And the sexuality comes from the ages of 9 to 14, which is from the secondary caregiver, typically the father. But even if it's in a single parent household, whoever that second person is, depending on how much that other person interacts with the mother, because what's happening here is the child is observing how that person interacts with the mother and how that person gets the mother's attention and affection. So that's what's happening here. This is all based on a child's perception. And this ends up becoming how they grow up, because what we're doing when we are growing up is we're basically creating our realm of familiarity. So when we're developing this sexuality in these terms, what we're doing is we're creating a defense against the behavior which causes us discomfort. And you'll understand as I go on. When somebody comes in for a session, I do have a questionnaire that I ask them which determines their suggestibility type. I give them information after the session so that they know what their suggestibility type is. If they're coming in for a session that has to do with something in regards to the way that they're having problems in their relationship, whether it's a pattern of bad relationships, whether they're unable to understand the world and they're just a little bit too uncomfortable, too much anxiety, too much conflict, things like that, then I give them the questionnaire that has to do with sexuality. It's not something that I go over with all of my clients because sometimes it's not part of the process. But when you know this information, it definitely helps you in your interactions in your personal life, in your romantic life, so whether it's at home, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your in-laws or your coworkers. Knowing this information helps you understand why people are as they are. And it gives a sense of relief a lot to my emo clients, because I tend to get a lot of emo clients in here that have high anxiety and not a lot of tolerance for the people, and understanding that they tend to be high on this scale of sexuality when it comes to this scale in particular, then they understand why they have such little tolerance for the fizzes of the world, and why fizzes, when they come in and they don't understand why they feel the way they feel, and then they learn this theory, then they understand and they know how to better navigate themselves and put their feelings in check. So this questionnaire is basically a scale. After the questions are asked, I have a scale from 0 to 100 to let me know what the dominant sexuality type is going to be and the subdominant. So when somebody is something like a 60-40, that's a great mix. 60-40 is good because you're 60% whatever, whether it's emo or fizz, great. But you have 40% subdominant tendencies, which means you are able to understand your partner, your coworkers, the people around you to that degree, to that extent. So if you are 70-30, you have less of that subdominant ability to understand and have tolerance for the other people around you. Once we start getting into that 80-20, then there's less tolerance for the other types. So if you are an emo and you're a high emo, say 80% emo, emotional, you're going to have a really hard time being around people that are fizzes. And that can create a lot of anxiety. It can make you question yourself a lot and wonder, what is it? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be like them? Some people get wrapped up in that. Some people absolutely don't care about it. But there is just a general underlying discomfort in as far as, why do I feel this way? So understanding where you fall on this spectrum really helps people out, and so that they can better relate to others. So next thing is, how is this formed? So as I mentioned earlier, our suggestibility comes from our moms, 0 to 8, and our sexuality comes from the secondary caregiver, dad per se, for instance. So then we have 9 to 14, we are observing the way that dad interacts with mom. So in those observations, if you have a fizz father is more along the lines of the dad that is like dad of the year, right? He's the dad who is out there with the kids. When they're babies, he's super involved. He's bouncing the baby on his lap, putting it on its shoulder, giving it lots of hugs and kisses, and just being so affectionate and loving, and just really touchy-feely loving to the baby. Chances are he's really lovey touchy-feeling to the mom too. Mom, when it's an emo mom, mom is she's a purposeful mom. She is there with the intention of responding to the child's needs. That's an emo mom. An emo mom, I've seen a lot of emo moms too, and I wish more women would understand this so that they could not feel bad about who they turned out to be as mothers, because when you're an emo and you have gone through your whole life just managing through relationships, and then you become a mom, there's a lot of guilt that can come with motherhood, because now you're comparing yourself to fizz moms. And when you're an emo mom and you're seeing this other mom that's so super playful and she's all lovey and affectionate with her kid, and she's just like all so over the top, and you're like a 70% emo or even a high 60, forget about it. You start to really go into yourself and feel bad about how you are as a mother, because you're comparing yourself to fizz moms. And the fizz moms are the ones that are posting pictures on Facebook about their great relationship with their children, and the emo moms are at home questioning themselves, like, why am I like this? Why can't I be like that? What's wrong with me? So keep this in mind. An emo dad is going to be like an emo mom, very inward, very internal, not necessarily so affectionate and showing that external love and affection towards the kids. There's still love, but it's not an outward display of it. They tend to be married to a fizz mom, and the fizz mom is the one that's that attentive mom, the one that is more physically forward and affectionate. So the fizz is going to be whoever it is, whether it's a fizz father or a fizz mother. They're going to be constantly seeking reassurance and love and affection and tokens of love, to know that they are accepted, that they are desired, that they are wanted, loved, all of that in their relationship. An emo, whether it's the male or the female, the primary or the secondary caregiver, that person is going to want space. Space, 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 and time. That's it. Just leave me alone. Don't bother me. I'm here. I'm here. Isn't that enough? That's the way emo rolls, and that's what you got to learn about emos. As an emo, that's it. And when you're a fizz and you're dating somebody or you're in a relationship with somebody who has that disposition, it can be hurtful and it can seem like there's rejection, which is a huge trigger for a fizz. But it's not that they're being rejected, it's just that, remember, it's the behavior that we are uncomfortable with that we create that defense against. So an emo is uncomfortable with that physical affection. An emo actually does not really like to have touch or affection as much. So learning this, observing this as children. Remember, this is the perspective of 9 to 14-year-olds, which they're kind of in their own world and they're not capturing the whole picture. And keep in mind the dynamics of a couple when they have one child versus a couple that has 4 children versus a child that comes in from a blended family and now we have a 6th child versus, there's so many numbers of children that we can have, right? I mean, like my grandmother had 11 children. So the first kids saw a very different relationship than the last 2 or 3 kids saw. By then, things were very different between my grandparents. So those type of dynamics in the mother-father figure in the first 2 parents, that's going to make a difference in the perspective that each child has, because they're going to have a very different relationship and dynamic of the home based on how many children there are in the home. So it is possible to have a whole bunch of siblings that are all fizzes, or you can have 2 that are fizzes and then that last one is an emo and you don't understand why, because something happened and the parents switched. So basically that parent is now not as affectionate. The secondary caregiver might have been just like completely turned off to the primary care parent, and now that dynamic has completely shifted. So it is possible to have a mix of this in family situations. So with that realm of familiarity that children are developing, when they grow up, they're looking to recreate that same space of comfort and that environment of comfort. So when they are dating, they're going to apply what they learned. So a fizz kid learns, if you want something, go get it. An emotional kid is going to learn, if you want something, just wait and it'll come to you. And that comes from watching the way that the parents interact. This happens, so if the mother is more physically attentive and she's the fizz and she's this, she's the one like that, that means the emo father, the secondary caregiver, is the one who's sitting back and just being, and when he allows the fizz mother to come and approach him, then the fizz mom approaches, and so the emo child is observing. Well, the child is basically a clean slate and he's observing this behavior and then catches on like, okay, so this is how you get mom. Got it. I'm just gonna sit here and let mom come to me. And then that child grows up to be an emo as an adult. So here's the thing about emos and fizzes. Once they get into a relationship, the way an emo goes out to find a partner, they have what we refer to as cubicles. For some reason, that was the term that they came up with at school. And I haven't thought to change the name. It's, I just remember the diagram and I remember this dynamic because it's really helpful to know. So going on a 7-day cycle, just assuming for the sake of understanding a week, Monday, Tuesday, let's say, those are the busy days for the emo. The emo is all business, and for those 2 days, if a fizz approaches an emo, they're going to get shut down big time. Emo is all work, and remember in my other video, I mentioned priority number 1 for an emo is career. And so they want to maintain that control because their number 1 trigger is the fear of control, fear of losing control. So they want to keep control. Career's number 1. Do not bother an emo when they are on those first 2 days. As a fizz, you're going to get rejected big time, and then that's just going to trigger your insecurities. So an emo has those first 2 days, let's say, okay, in the 7 day cycle. It could depend. It could be a shorter cycle. It could be a longer cycle. Longer cycles tend to happen when there's a lot of stress, when somebody's under crisis mode. Then there's no getting in with an emo for who knows how long. So for the sake of simplicity, we're going to do that 7 day. So the first 2 days, Monday, Tuesday, all work all the time. Wednesday, okay, a little bit more relaxation. Maybe they're going to start to show a little bit of interest and put some time into their hobbies, because remember, their hobbies come next. Then friends. So maybe right around Thursday, they can be somewhat interested in talking and socializing. That's when they're kind of starting to relax. The week is done, their responsibilities are done. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, perhaps you get the romance. And I don't necessarily mean romance, because emos aren't always that romantic, but that's when they're much more approachable. So that's when the fizz would benefit in approaching the emo. That's when you go forward. That's when the emo comes forward. That's when they come out and now they're fizzed up, because they're not all emo all the time. Remember, there's the dominant type and then there's the subdominant. So if they are a 70% emo and they've got that 30% fizz, that's how much fizz you're going to get on their days that they are open and available. So knowing this helps a fizz know when to approach their emo. And if they come on a day that they are unapproachable, they got to know not to take it personally, because this is the way the emo functions. The emo is trying to recreate their realm of comfort that was established during their childhood, and they learned it this way. So it has nothing to do with the fizz, but a fizz, because to them, love and affection, that constant reassurance, is a way of them knowing that they are loved. They're going to be seeking and seeking. So if they come forward to an emo on a day that they are not receptive and they get rejected, then depending on where they are on their scale, they can go into a bad spiral of rejection, or they can be more understanding and realize, like, okay, well, they've got 40% emo tendencies, maybe 60, so they understand this emo person. They understand, like, okay, I get it, you need time, it's not about me, I'm gonna go do what I gotta do. And that is actually one of the things that makes the fizz more attractive to the emo. When the emo isn't being so pursued because the fizz is so busy doing what they like to do, they want to know, what happened to you? Why aren't you coming on to me? So then they come out a little bit more. It's a really neat dance, but you got to know the steps to the dance to know what's happening. Otherwise, conflict can arise. Conflict arises by basically the honeymoon phase ending. Remember, the emo is only going to come forward when they are fizzed up, when they are much more in the mood to come out and be approached and approaching. So they come out when they're fizzed up, and only then. So now you have them hanging out and being social, and that's when they catch their partner. That's when they get their fizz, typically. So they go out, and when they're going out, once the fizz begins to open up to the emotional, and the emotional then feels comfortable enough to allow the fizz to be physical with them, and that relationship has reached a level where the emo feels, I'm comfortable, I've recreated that environment of comfort that I knew from my childhood, now I can go back to being myself. And myself for an emo means in their mind, in themselves. The way I visualize it is basically you bring them home and then you go to your room, and then the fizz is left there like, what happened? Why did you change? What's going on? And it's not that the emo changed, it's that they're done being fizzed out. They are now exhausted from being so fizzed out that they need some time to recover. And since they've allowed you into their world, they assume that you understand, this is me, I'm going to go retreat into my corner and I'm going to recover until I can come out again. And they can't help it. They don't know it. No one teaches you these things. Like, there are cycle days, and there will come a time again when that emo fizzes up and is more approaching and approachable. So once they're there, what can happen when that conflict arises? Because now the fizz can start to feel, well, you've changed, my dear emo partner. What happened? What did I do wrong? They start to question themselves and they come forward. They come forward because their number one fear, as I mentioned in the other video, is rejection. So because they fear rejection, and this is what they're completely uncomfortable with it. So they're going to come forward and they're going to want answers. They want to talk now. Let's talk about our problems now. And the emotional does not like to lose control. They like space. They like to be left alone. So the emo retreats. They go further and further into themselves, and that day of them fizzing up goes further and further away. So the fizz pushes, the emo backs away. And what can happen here is, if infidelity is in your frame of familiar and acceptable behavior, because that's in that 88 subconscious percent of the mind that I mentioned in the other video, if infidelity is something that is acceptable, something that you can identify with because perhaps people in your immediate surrounding did it when you were a child, whether it was your parents or your aunt and uncle or your best friends from high school, from college, whatever. If it's something that you've seen, you understand, you can identify with, then that's when it can happen. Because the fizz feels so rejected that they don't know what to do. And out there in the world, there could be another fizz that's looking for affection, that knows how it feels, how it hurts, because the fizz will go to extreme levels of sexual behavior to repress that fear, to repress those feelings of being rejected. So they go overboard because they can't handle the idea of being rejected. The emotional will and can cheat because, well, they need to go and check to see if they're still okay. Is there something wrong with me? Is it me or is it them? And so instead of talking with their partner, because they tend to internalize, they basically, the way I see it, that door is closed, but the emo went out the window and the fizz still thinks the emo's there, but the emo's not really there. The emo's already gone. And that tends to happen is the emo will stay physically in a relationship, but emotionally and mentally, they've checked out. And that can explain a lot of things for the end times of relationships. But here, what happens is the emo will go out on a day that he or she is fizzed up. They're not going to go out on a Monday or a Tuesday on a day that they're all business, because they're all business. So of course they're not going to go out and then find someone who's going to say, you know what, your partner's right. You are not affectionate. You are not into any of this. So go keep to yourself. They're going to go out on the day that they are fizz. And so they are going to attract somebody who's going to come in and basically give them some sense of validation and understanding that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me, it's them. So that can happen when conflict arises and there isn't an understanding of this dynamic of ENP. So this I'm explaining because I think it helps people understand the other side when it comes to relationships, and to help you understand not just how to be comfortable with yourself, but how to be comfortable relating to other people. Knowing where you are on that scale helps you understand, well, you know what, my boyfriend isn't rejecting me today. It's that, he's an emo and he has a deadline, and I know he's busy focused on that, and that's what he needs. And I'm going to give him his space and I'm going to work on my things. Great. I'll see him when he's fizzed up. I have things to do too. And if your partner is a fizz and you want to go out with your fizz, then your fizz is pretty much going to be ready all the time to go out. The thing is that if you're an emo and you're dating a fizz, you've got to keep in mind, it's very helpful to keep in mind to pre-plan tokens of affection. So something that I suggest to clients is to sit down one day and just write out a bunch of little love notes, stamp them, have them labeled, addressed, everything ready to go. so that on the days that you're going to be super busy, just pop them in the mail and let these cute little tokens of affection and love arrive. Send them flowers on days that you know you're going to be busy, things like that. That way the fizz keeps on getting those tokens of affection and they leave you alone so you can focus on work. That's a great tip, right? Because as an emo, it's nice to be left alone to do your work because that's what you like to do. So I hope this video helps. I know it's on the long side again, but it's a very helpful thing to know, and I wanted you guys to understand it. I did get some questions after the other video I made about sexuality and what I meant by it, so I knew I had to make this video to explain that I wasn't speaking about terms of sexuality like everyone else is these days. That's not what I'm speaking about, but you can see that these terms and this way of living, of being sexual, in as that this is the way you organize and express yourself in life, this applies to everyone. It doesn't matter what you're doing out there in regards to sexuality and all of those things. So this is the explanation of the theory of EMP in regards to sexuality with Kappasinean theory in mind. I'm Susanna with Hypnosis Haven. I look forward to more of your questions and making more videos for you guys. If you want to get a hold of me, you can visit my website, hypnosis-haven.com, and there's contact info. You can schedule a consultation. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff. You can get a hold of me through there. I'll put all the information below. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video and all of that good stuff. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.